Hey, online Northview, welcome to Football Sunday.
See, it's not Football Sunday. Is that why you wore your soccer jersey today? It's Super Bowl Sunday, man.
I got very confused. Welcome to Super Bowl Sunday. We are so glad that you guys are joining in with us. I want to share with you again about Cans of Hope. This is a ministry that we're doing through the whole month of February where we are collecting different items to bless the Senior Center and to bless the food pantry here in Danville. There's a list on our webpage right now that you can go to and you can find all of those different items. You can bring them to the church on Sunday mornings, or you can also drop them off anytime during the week while we are open. This is just an exciting way for us to come together as one body and to bless two ministries that are doing phenomenal work here in Danville.
Yeah, speaking of Super Bowl Sunday, I want to talk to you about the Northview students. We're going to have a big Super Bowl party tonight in the Student Center. So all of our middle school and high school students are invited. Man, we got a 220-inch screen that we're putting this on. Plus other screens, we got all kinds of food, pizza, wings, drinks. I mean, we're going to have basketball, ping pong, pool. You can do anything while you watch the game there. It's going to be a lot of fun. So tonight at 6, doors are open. Listen, it's cold outside today, but we're going to have the heaters on. It'll be great. Also, I want to talk to you about CIY. Every year, our students get to go to CIY, and we're looking forward to doing that this year. One of the ways that we get to go is through the pie auction. Every year, our church blesses our students through that. And this year, it's happening on February 21st, and we would love to get some help from you guys by donating a pie for that day. If you would be willing to donate a pie, there's a number that you see right now. Just text the word pie to that number, and then bring that pie. Let us know that you're going to bring it, and then bring it that day on February the 21st, and we would love to get your help with that.
Church, we are so glad that you are joining in with us. So why don't you get off your couches and turn that volume up and begin worshiping with us.
We need no other hiding place. Our hope is safe within your name. This I know, this we know. Your promise never to forsake. What you began, you will sustain. This I know, this we know.
Jesus Christ has broken every chain.
chains, I came to your door and fell on the floor. A mercy, guilty I stood, and guilty I was. I couldn't hide my shame. Just as I am, just as I am, Jesus, you welcomed me, you took me in. I'll never be the same again. My life held in your hand, just as I am. Save the place, amazing grace. You came all the way to meet me. You carried me home with a ring and a robe. Through your loving arms around me, just as I am, just as I am. Jesus, you welcomed me, you took me in. I'll never be the same again. My life held in your hand, just as I am without me. But that your love was shed for me, and that with me come to thee. Oh, Lamb of God, I come, just as I am without me. But that your blood was shed for me, and that you bid me come to thee. Oh, Lamb of God, I come, just as I am. Jesus, you welcome me, you took me in. I'll never be the same again. My life held in your hand, just as I am, just as I am. Jesus, you welcome me, you took me in. I'll never be the same again. My life held in your hand. Oh, my life is held in your hand, just as I am.
Worship team, thank you so much for leading us in that worship set. And as we continue worshiping in our homes or maybe in our cars as we're driving to work, I know that it could still feel weird or strange maybe to be singing out loud in such a small area. But what I am encouraged about is that worship is all about the heart. It's all about what God is doing inside of us and the overflow of what He has been teaching us or how He's showing us His love in a different way comes out in the songs that we sing. I'm also thinking about generosity, and worship through generosity is also from the heart, and it comes out in the ways that we give. It's the ways that we trust God with what He has blessed us with to give back to Him so that He can do great and mighty and powerful things, so that He can continue to write stories of salvation, stories of life change in other people's lives. And we would love for you to continue to partner with us in generosity, and you can do that by hitting the give button button on the online church platform. You can go to our webpage, our app, you can mail in a check. And we're just grateful for the ways that we continue together to trust in God and this journey He is leading us on, this journey of life change for us as we trust Him and life change for others as we see God use our finances to bless people in wonderful ways. Now, church, I'm excited about Nathan coming up and sharing another message through the book of Exodus.
Well, hey, good morning, Northview Online. It's so great to connect with you again this morning. Hope you're doing well. Again, want to emphasize, as we've done so many times before, you are one with us. We are one with you. We're all part of this journey together. We're ready whenever you're ready to join us in person. Our in-person services are continuing to grow and to just be great experiences, and we would love to see you join in one of those with us when you feel ready. Guys, this is Super Bowl Sunday. It's always kind of a fun Sunday. I know that has nothing to do with church, but it's on a lot of people's minds. And it's always fun, just kind of creates a festive atmosphere a little bit. It got me thinking this Super Bowl Sunday about all the different ways that we're going to participate and cheer and tune in today. I know many people are already beginning to pick their sides and pick which team they think is going to win. Maybe you could do that right now with those who you're watching it with. You could just lean over to your neighbor and say, here's who's going to win. It's going to be the Chiefs. How many of you think the Chiefs are going to win? How many of you think the Buccaneers are going to win? Yeah, for some reason, Brian Clark still thinks the Cowboys are going to win, but if you want to clue him in and let them know that they're not playing in it this year, you can do that. We've had fun this week doing that with him. Sean seems to think that the Buccaneers are going to prevail, that Tom Terrific is going to do his thing, and that the Buccaneers are going to find a way to win this game. I tend to lean towards Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Either way, I think tonight is going to be a fun game. I'm going to be tuning in. I know many of you are as well. Here's what I'm going to be looking for tonight. And this often dictates what happens in a game and where a game goes, is who is going to struggle first. Sometimes early struggles in the Super Bowl can make the outcome of the game certain. This certainly happened in 1992. I remember the Bills and the Redskins Super Bowl. The Bills were excited to be there. They had lost a heartbreaker in the year before to the New York Giants, and they were there at the Super Bowl again. And this thing, man, was a nightmare for them. I mean, Thurman Thomas couldn't find his helmet to start the game, so he doesn't go out on the field. All kinds of fumbles and miscues and turnovers. Jim Kelly, 4 INTs. I mean, they were down like 24-0 at halftime, and this thing was steamrolling in the wrong direction. I remember in 2014 watching in Washington with a whole group, a whole house full of Seahawks fans as the Seahawks took on the Denver Broncos. And that game was one where the Broncos struggled early. Some of you may remember on the first series of the game, a fumbled snap heads back over Peyton Manning's shoulder. It turns into a safety. And in a game that seemingly had just gotten started, the Broncos are working uphill, and it was just a steamroller of a game. Seattle won 43-6 or 8 or something like that. It was just a blowout of a game. And those early struggles really, really doomed the Broncos in that game. They started out with such excitement, these games do, and at some point, though, that awesomeness and that excitement and that celebration of the game for one of the teams often turns into a lot of discouragement, turns into a lot of setbacks, and a lot of heartache for them. And you know, as we're in Exodus 16 today, and that's where we're going to start. We've been looking over the last several weeks at this story through the book of Exodus, looking at the experiences of the Israelites as they were led out of captivity in Egypt into the promised land, but specifically as they navigated through the wilderness in that time in between. We're at the part in this story where We've had the celebration. We've had the big excitement. We made it to the Super Bowl. We crossed the Red Sea. And now life starts to get a little difficult. It starts to get a little challenging. They've seen God's incredible power. They've seen how God has displayed his strength undeniably in their lives. But they're at this place, and this is going to be an interesting study here for us, because God doesn't immediately take them from captivity in Egypt straight to the promised land. He's got a place that he needs to do some work in their heart and in their lives before they're ready for the promised land. And that place turns out to be the wilderness. It's a place of struggle. It's a place of pain. It's a place of great difficulty. And I think we obviously quickly ask a question like, why does God do that? Like, why does God get them out of prison and not just take them straight to the promised land? Why does there have to be a whole bunch of stuff and time and pain and difficulty in between? I think one of the simple answers is this, is that they were out of Egypt now, but the Egypt wasn't out of them. And 400 years in a foreign land, foreign gods, foreign customs, that's a long time for you to forget any and everything, for generations to pass, and for new generations to be completely disconnected from who God is, from what it is to be his people and how to live in the way that he would call them to live. And so God's going to do some stuff. He's going to take them on a journey in the wilderness to try to get that Egypt out of them and to reshape them. And we've said this multiple times throughout this series, but one of the reasons that this book, Exodus, is so incredible is because it's a metaphor for the entire Christian experience. And it's not hard to start seeing some of these connections. I mean, like the Israelites going through the Red Sea is a connection to baptism. It's a connection to salvation. It's a connection to this dramatic experience that we have where God rescues, where God saves us. We see this deliverance from Egypt is kind of compatible with like deliverance from sin. We see that the promised land is like heaven, and then the wilderness then is this time between salvation and heaven, life until we get there. And again, we often ask this question like, why? Why do we have to do it this way? And I think that the answer that the Bible gives, not just through the Exodus series, but throughout the Scriptures, especially in the New Testament, when we look at life after the resurrection, is that going through the wilderness isn't necessary for salvation, but it is necessary for sanctification. It's necessary for God, after he saved us, to go through a process with us to remake us, to mold us, to shape us, to sanctify, and to make us into his image. It's one thing to be singing the praises of your deliverer when everything's going right. It's another thing to be leaning into him in faith when you're confronted with everyday life struggles. That's what sanctification is all about. It's this long, slow process of being conformed to the holiness and to the image of God. Israel's faith in God was real. It was very real, but it was in its infancy, and it needed room to breathe. It needed room to grow. And so God takes them out of Egypt and into the wilderness where he can shape and mold them a bit. And in doing so, he allowed them to struggle. He allowed them to go through some things that would shape them, some things that would set the stage for him to provide and for them to know that these struggles were only solvable or were only met through his provision. As they struggled and as they worked through these difficulties, God was coming alongside them. He was teaching them. He was guiding them. He was strengthening them. And he was reminding them, I am everything you need. Now what's fascinating, and we're going to look at three specific struggles that Israel faced in these early days in the desert, in the wilderness. And if we kind of come out a bit and look at these as a metaphor, they're the very same struggles that we face in our journey through the wilderness. Our wilderness may not look like a literal desert, but we find these moments in our journey where in a similar way, life gets hard, life gets difficult, and we ask many, many times these questions of God, like, why are we doing it this way? Why does it have to be like this? And I think all the while the answer is, because I'm doing something in you. I'm doing something in you to make you more like me and to allow you to trust me even more. So let's look at these three struggles that show up in Exodus 16, 17, and 18. The first one is physical needs. It's a struggle for physical needs. Food, literally food and water. Literally food and water. I mean, nothing gets our attention. Like, nothing grabs our attention like a lack of physical needs, specifically a lack of food and water. The Israelites get out into the desert, and without water for a couple days, as you can imagine, people start to get irritable. Snickers, in a Super Bowl commercial in 2010, made famous the tagline that "You're not you when you're hungry." And they played it up with celebrities like Betty White. They used this term in a future commercial called hangry, and they begin to play up this idea that we get hangry when we're really hungry, and we need something to eat or to drink. Man, there's just something in our body that starts to get off, and we start to act out. And the phrase was, "You're not you when you're hungry." Now, many of us resonated with that. In fact, many of us probably had people in our families who we could identify with that line, maybe more than others. Like, maybe think about in your family right now, or maybe in the room that you're watching this with, if you're watching it with some friends. Who is the most likely to get hangry in your household? I mean, everybody gets hungry. Everybody gets hungry from time to time, but some of us get hangry. And I mean, we make life miserable for everybody around us. Anybody pointing fingers? Anybody calling out? Is there unison in the room? Are you guys agreeing with each other? You know, I think in our family, we'd all be pointing the finger at my youngest, Bryce. He's the hangriest of the rectors at our house. If Bryce is tired or hungry, he just kind of operates in a space that is like Israel was doing. This is what Israel was doing. They were thirsty. They needed something to drink. So they go to this water source. They come across the water source in a place called Marah, and it's unfortunately rancid, bitter water. It's contaminated in some way. Unfortunately, rancid, bitter water. It's contaminated in some way. They can't drink it. And so that makes them even more irritable. Moses cries out to God. Moses says, "God, we need water. We need water." God hears his prayer. He tells him to take a piece of wood and to throw it into the water. And when he put that wood in the water became sweet. They were able to drink. God takes them from there to a place called Elim. And in Elim, they not only find more water to drink, but they find this very fertile little spot with palm trees and ample water. So God meets their needs. He meets their needs. No water is a real need. And then God meets it. So, does that then mean that the next time that they faced any kind of food or water shortage, that they would immediately trust God and know, hey, he's going to take care of us? Remember last time we found water, it wasn't even drinkable, and God gave Moses the ability to throw this wood into the water. It turned sweet and drinkable. So, hey, we shouldn't worry about this. God is always going to take care of us when we face these situations. Is that what happened? No. In fact, Israel will regularly grumble about food and water. In fact, 9 times in the next couple chapters, the word grumble shows up. And it's used to describe their dissatisfaction. The next time is in Exodus chapter 16, verse 2. And this time they don't have food, the food that they want. The whole desert community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If we had only died by the Lord's hand in Egypt, there we sat around pots of meat and we ate all the food we wanted. But you've brought us into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Now, whining was surely Israel's regular constant sin, but this is grumbling. This is on a whole different level. I mean, this is more than just disgruntled. This word seems to describe like an open rebellion. The people are beginning to rebel, and they're saying it like this. They're saying, "I wish we had never been saved. I wish we were back in Egypt. I wish we're still living under oppression." I mean, there's a madness to this, but it's what happens sometimes when we suffer. It's what happens sometimes when we face physical needs and they're going unmet, and we just get overwhelmed. And we start to do a couple things. We start to exaggerate our current situation, and we also start to exaggerate the former situation. I mean, they act like they have no food whatsoever. And this is an exaggeration of what's going on. We're running out of food wasn't really true. They still had flocks that they'd brought out of Egypt. They could still drink milk. They could still make cheese. If necessary, they could even eat meat. They just didn't want to go down that road. Psalm 78 seems to confirm this idea that the food shortage wasn't so much that they didn't have any. It was that they didn't have what they wanted. It wasn't that they didn't have what was essential for survival. It's that they didn't have what they wanted. So they're exaggerating their current situation because they didn't have what they wanted. Not only that, they're exaggerating their former situation and looking back in this romantic way of their own slavery. And it's like they've forgotten life in Egypt was miserable. It was absolutely miserable. We were under the thumb of Egyptian taskmasters, being worked to the bone. And they're romanticizing that and saying, man, if we could have just gone back to that. Amazingly, God deals in this moment with great grace with his people. And after hearing the grumbling, God sends blessing. He sends quail and he sends manna. This substance that comes down from heaven and rests on the ground. It was so strange to the people that when they looked out in the morning, they said, what is that? What is it? And what is it actually became known as its name because it was so commonly said by everyone when they saw it. What is it? Manna. Moses tells the people, I'll tell you what it is. It's the bread that God has given you to eat. And they gathered it. It tasted kind of sweet like honey. They baked it. They boiled it. They had all kinds of ways, made all kinds of things with it. This was the way that manna showed up every morning outside the tents, and God sustained them through everything they did in the desert with this manna. He did this for decades for the people. Now, once again, we ask the question. So they had a basic need, they had a physical need, and God met it. So as they see this miracle, as they respond to God and what he's done, surely the next time that they face another food or water shortage, they do the same. They trust in God fully and completely, right? No. That's not what we do. That's not what we do. So they face another water issue. And in verse 2 of chapter 17, again, it says they quarrel with Moses and they said, give us water to drink. Moses replied, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test? But the people were thirsty for water there. And they grumbled against Moses. And they said, why do you bring us out of Egypt and make us and our children and livestock to die of thirst? Moses cried out to the Lord, what am I to do with these people? They really want to stone me. Even though God had continued to meet all of their needs, they continued to complain and quarrel and fight. They were never content, no matter what God did or no matter what God provided for him. Isn't that the attitude sometimes that we have? I mean, part of this is a reflection of the human condition. And then when our physical needs are under threat or are not met, we just come undone. I'm reminded of Jesus' teaching of daily bread and asking the Lord for daily bread. That's what these guys had to depend on God for. It was a daily dependence on God. But in doing so, it opened up the door at any given moment for a lack of contentment, for frustration over the situation. And instead of seeing the blessing of what God was providing, to be able to look with discontent at the situation for what it wasn't. Our hearts sometimes do that same thing. And instead of seeing all the ways God is providing for us, we see all the things that aren't quite right or all the needs that we see that should be met in a different way. We begin to get frustrated. We begin to gripe and be discontent. Our hearts, almost like gravitational pull, just start to get yanked towards complaint towards God. I mean, do a spiritual inventory for a second. Just in your own life, in your own heart. Do a little bit of spiritual inventory and ask yourself, did any of these statements reflect me? So I regularly wish I had a different job. And I have a bad attitude when I'm at work. I'm consistently disappointed in my relationships, whether they're my parents or my spouse or my friends or my kids. People don't meet my emotional needs, and so I'm just resentful about that. I deal with disappointment and discontent in my life by watching a lot of TV, going shopping more than healthy, and feeding my addictions. I'm losing a sense of hope about life. I'm becoming more cynical as I grow older. I really get ticked off at the good things and the circumstances that people have around me. It seems to be that everybody else is enjoying life and I'm not. Does any of that describe you? Do you start to feel discontent and complaints just welling up within you? Here's the problem with that. Grumbling and complaints, especially towards God, it's like an unwanted house guest that you can't get rid of. They seem to just be there. You didn't invite them, but they show up. And you come home from another frustrating day, and you find out that the complaint has now moved into your guest room. It's unpacked its bags, started a load of laundry, started making its way through your fridge. And even though you try to resist, anytime you try to push back, anytime it just moves its bags you move its bags to the curbs, you change the locks, it just seems to creep back in to your life and into your home. It's almost like complaints and grumbling resist eviction. Really, the only way that complaining gets out of our life, the only way it gets evicted is through trust. It's by replacing that negative activity with a positive activity. Trust evicts complaints. Trust and complaint are incompatible roommates. One pushes the other one out. And remember, in Exodus, the big question is this: who are you going to serve? Who are you going to worship, God or Pharaoh? God is using this experience and even allowing this struggle with basic physical needs so that the people will be reminded, I am the one true God, and I will provide everything you need. Not everything you want, but everything you need. That's a wilderness struggle that's very real for all of us. At different points in our lives, the physical needs of life become very real, and they become a pathway or a platform for God to do big-time faith work in our lives. So the next time you find yourself ready to complain and ready to be disgruntled and to grumble at God, remind yourself this may be an opportunity for God to grow me and to show me something new about everything He wants to provide for me. Let's talk about wilderness struggle number 2. Wilderness struggle number 2 is painful battles. This is something Israel's going to face when they're out in the wilderness. They're going to get attacked. I mean, literally attacked by other groups of people. Those other groups of people feel threatened by the fact that now this 2 million strong group of people is kind of wandering through the desert and taking up some of their resources. And so people like the Amalekites are going to attack the Israelites. That's what happens in Exodus chapter 17. They ambush, and specifically they start targeting the back of the caravan. They start going after the weak and the ones that they can mow down a little bit easier. And so Joshua gets sent into battle by Moses. This is the same Joshua who will eventually take over as leader of the people of Israel and who will actually be the one to lead the conquest into the promised land. In the wilderness season, he's kind of a second in command, or kind of maybe your military leader, if you will, for Israel. Moses sends Joshua into battle, and they begin to attack. And there's an interesting story that comes in Exodus 17, verse 11, as it relates to the attack. It says that as long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him as he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on each side, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. You know, the sense of this story is that the enemies, even though God is in the process of working and moving His people to the promised land, God's enemies have not surrendered. They may have certain defeat out in front, but they're not surrendered. And I think in the same way, we fight and find ourselves in battles, painful battles. I don't know what painful battle you might be in right now. It could be relationship related. It could be finance related. It could be spiritual warfare, where our adversary, the devil, is just seemingly waylaying on you. Our enemy has not surrendered. And when we face adversity, I learned from this story that God has provided in the midst of personal battles a way to find hope and protection and certain victory. And I think the allusion here is an obvious one, but it's that of prayer. It's that of prayer. I know technically it does not say Moses prayed, but his prayers or his cries out to God are repeated multiple times, whether it's for the water or for the food or for the people and what to do with the people. Here, it's not so much a spoken prayer as it is an acted out prayer. As he sticks his hands in the air with his staff held high, it's a proclamation, it's a prayer to God. And as he was praying, as his hands were extended, the Israelites were winning. And as he was weary and his hands came down, Israelites would face a turning of the tides and they would start losing the battle. So he propped up his hands. He even had Aaron and Hur hold his hands up so Israel could face that battle with certain victory. Prayer is our ready weapon for battle. There's a power of prayer in prayer. There's a dependence on God through prayer. Even just in our posture of prayer, as we begin to acknowledge that God, you and you alone are the one through whom this victory comes. You know, here lately, there's been a newer worship song that's just kind of been on repeat in my head. It's called The Battle Belongs by Phil Wickham. And it's one of those songs that just, it speaks and hooks into your head, both with the tune and also with the message. And there's a phrase in the song that says, when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. God Israel in the battle through prayer. He provided through Moses crying out to God for his strength, for his guidance, for his victory. And God delivered in that moment. As we go through our wilderness struggles, specifically struggles where we feel these battles all around us, we feel pain, where we feel difficulty and stress, we're reminded of the weapon and of the protection and the provision that God has given us through prayer to be able to connect, to be able to share with Him. And there's nothing special about words that you have to say when you pray. It's about stopping trying to work within your own strength and acknowledging that God is sovereign, that He is in control, and that He can empower you through your weakness. Which this leads me to the third struggle. Because the third struggle in the wilderness is one of personal limits, specifically Moses. But we all face in our journey in this life, we all face moments where physically we come to the edge of what we can handle. We come to the edge of what we can do. Moses is experiencing this on a spiritual leadership level. He's a leader of 2 million plus people. That includes food and resources. That includes the military campaign stuff. And that also includes just day-to-day civilian life and overseeing it all. You got to remember that we haven't gotten to the Ten Commandments yet. There isn't laws. There aren't standards. There aren't stated objectives of how we're going to live. And so everything is up and subject to opinion right now. And there's a lot, as always, there's always been different people who see life differently. And so Moses has to be the arbitrator of all the rules and everything to do. And he's just overwhelmed. He's overwhelmed trying to do all the work of the ministry. He would sometimes people look at a guy like him and go, well, what all did you have to do? His life was overwhelmingly complex with all the leadership on him. And in Exodus chapter 18, we get a story where Moses gets a visit from his father-in-law. And he gets to recap the whole story of the Exodus and how God moved through the plagues and displayed His power and the death of the firstborn and the Passover and the Red Sea. And he shares with him the whole story. And essentially Jethro is evangelized. He's converted. He responds in faith to what Moses has to say. And he says in Exodus chapter 18, now I know who the one true God is. But not only does he sympathize or connect through this evangelistic moment with with Moses. He sympathizes with him because he sees this load that's on him. And he sees all that Moses is trying to do. And in Exodus chapter 18, verse 17, Moses' father-in-law tells him, Moses, what you're doing is not good. You and these people who come to you are only going to wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You can't handle this alone. When I was reading this week, that phrase in verse 17, what you're doing is not good. I don't know why, but I immediately reflected back to a trip I took to Uganda in 2015. And when I was there, we had an experience at the very, very end of the trip. Been an incredible week of ministry. And at the very end of the trip, we ended up going to a wildlife preserve, and it was just unbelievable to be able to see in the wild so many different animals that I'd only seen in zoos or on television, and to be able to see it live and in person and up close. And the way this worked, I mean, you just basically paid a price to get in, and we had a van, and we could drive and kind of go wherever we wanted to go. And you were basically at your own risk. And so we took some different roads at different times. And of course, because of the weather, these roads that we were on were in various conditions. And our pastor that we were with was a local pastor there. And of course, he had experience, had been here before a few different times. And we ended up taking what he felt like was a better road from the experience perspective. Not necessarily a better road from the quality of the road perspective, but a better road from what we might see and experience. And as we took that road, we ended up encountering some spots that were extremely muddy and washed out and were going to be very, very difficult to pass. He was a wizard driving this van that we were in. There was at least 100 opportunities where I thought, there is no way we're getting out of here. We're going to be camping out here tonight, and we're going to be hanging out with these lions and giraffes and everything while we're here. At one point, though, we got stuck, and he was backing up and going forward a few different times to try to break loose. And all of our attention was on straight ahead. Everybody in the van, we were all looking just straight ahead as we were encountering this obstacle of this muddy passing. I looked over to my right, and not 20 feet to my right was 3 or 4 elephants, closer than I've ever been to elephants. In the wild, just bam, right there. And as soon as he did it, he was in reverse, going back and forth. He had backed up and was about to go forward. As soon as he backed up and I looked over and I saw how close we were to him, I wanted to take a picture. And so I said, Ronald, wait. I want to get a picture. I'm fumbling to try to get my phone out so I can get a picture of this incredible up-close elephant. Ronald slams the car in drive, and he goes, this is not good. And he hammered the gas. He goes, they will ram us. And so he just hammered the gas, and we got out of there. I never even got to take a picture of that close encounter with the elephant. What seemed like something that was good turns out to be very, very dangerous, very, very bad. Jethro's looking at Moses and saying, this is not good. They will ram you. They will overwhelm you. This is not going to go well. You need help. And so Jethro helps Moses see that he needs a team to support him and help carry him through this. And so they spread out this load that Moses was dealing with. He says, Moses, you need to focus on the most important things. And you need to give some guys who you trust, who have the ability to do what's right, the ability to arbitrate all these daily cases, okay? So they spread this out, and this just to show you how much was on him. It took 70 men to spread out everything that Moses was doing on. 70. He was carrying the load of 70 people. That's why Jethro said, Moses, you can't do this. You can't carry on this way. There are physical limits that you have. You are not going to be able to sustain it. And God, in this moment, empowers and provides, just like he had with the food and water and the physical needs, just like he had with the painful battles. At the end of his rope, Moses finds God's strength in this moment in the form of a team. Other times, God sends his power in different ways, but in this moment, he sends it in a team. He'll always send, God will, His strength and His power when we find the end of our personal limits. And He often does it by sending other people to help carry the burden, by sending other people to team up with us in life and to carry us forward and to move on together. Tonight, I know there's going to be so much attention on a couple quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, but the reality is there's going to be 10 other people on the field with those guys every single time they're on the field. And then 50% of the time, they're not even on the field. The defense and a whole nother group of 11. The special teams, a whole nother group of 11. They are a part of a team. They are not going to be able to win anything by themselves. Moses was an incredible leader, but he couldn't do it all by himself. He was a good leader. He was a godly leader. But if we could fast forward just a little bit in the story to Jesus, there was a better leader coming. In fact, when Jesus came, one of the most amazing things He did for Israel at that point in the story was to connect what happened in Exodus to what was happening through Him. In fact, He says in John 6, verse 35, I'm the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. What's the context of this verse? The context is the crowd that He's preaching to. This is right after He's fed the 5,000. They want Him to do more. They want Him to do this again. And they say, what sign will you give us, Jesus, that will show us that you are who you say you are? Our ancestors were fed by Moses in the desert. He gave them manna to eat. And Jesus says, I tell you the truth, your ancestors, they were fed manna from the desert, true, but they eventually died. I'm telling you, I'm the bread of life, and you come to me, and you'll never go hungry. I am a well, and you come to me and you'll never be thirsty. Jesus is the bread of life. He is that which sustains us. He is the one who stands with us in the wilderness. He didn't just die on a cross so that once we die, we get to go to heaven. Like Moses with his hands outstretched, Jesus stretched those hands out on that cross. He stretched His hands out on that cross and achieved that victory for us. But He also uses those same hands to figuratively wrap Himself around us as we go through life. And He leads us. He's the irreplaceable leader. He's the newer and better Moses. He does not wear out. He does not grow weary. In fact, He comes and calls us and says to any who are weary, to any who are tired, to any who have come to the end of their physical limits, come to me and I will give you rest. So church, family, friends, here's the reality. Life is a lot like a wilderness. And in the wilderness, we are always being tested. We are always being provided opportunities to trust God more. This is the question. This is the question, and you can only answer it for yourself. Will you trust Jesus for all your needs? For some of you, I want to ask you to consider for the very first time saying yes to that question. Will I trust Jesus to meet all my needs? I want to ask you to take that step and to say yes to Jesus and to say, yes, I will allow Him to meet all my needs. Our online hosts are going to be reaching out to you right now, and they'll provide an opportunity for you to respond and an opportunity to explain to you what it is to place your faith in Jesus, what it is to lean your whole life upon Him, to trust Him for everything in life, to trust Him for the forgiveness of your sins, to trust Him for the leadership of your life. For everyone, maybe who've already made that decision in life at one point, this is an opportunity to renew that trust, right? It's to evict those complaints. It's to evict all the grumbling and to say, no, we're going to replace that with trust in Jesus. This is going to be the path that we're going to walk from this day forward. It's a moment to renew our faith in Him, to be reminded of those words of Jesus, that in Him we find our bread, in Him we find our water, in Him we'll never be hungry and we'll never be thirsty again. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we are so thankful that You are our provider and that You have made a way and that You continue to make a way in our lives, in the various wilderness moments and experiences that we have. That you reveal your provision for us in our lives. Lord, as we go through our battles, as we find strength in our daily needs, and as you help us to separate what is a want and what is a need, as you give us your leadership and take us to places we can't go in our own strength, Lord, I pray that you would renew constantly our trust in you. That like you have miraculously saved us, that you will continue to do that miracle in our own heart and in our own life and conform us more and more into the image of your Son, Jesus. We love you, we thank you, and we trust you in this moment. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Church, as we wind down our service time, I want to focus us on communion. Communion is an opportunity for us to remember that God has provided a way for us to salvation, for us to experience life in the fullness that Jesus wants us to have. And so as you take your piece of bread and as you take your juice or whatever that might look like for you, know that God has provided something that you and I could never provide for ourselves. That He has given us something that you and I could never obtain for ourselves. That He has given us life in Jesus. And so may you today experience that life. May you long for that life that God has given to you all week long. And we are so grateful that you have joined us today. We cannot wait to see you again next week.